On today's episode, we are talking about a beloved sitcom, Who's the Boss?
I was going to try to start doing the theme song, and I just realized I couldn't do the song part in my head. And I was like, there is more to life than what you're living. So take a chance and face the wind.
I don't know.
Open road and a road that's hidden. Brand new life around the bend. There were times I lost a dream or two, found a trail, and at the end was you. There's a path you take and the path not taken. The choice is up to you, my friend. Life's a long, but you're on your way to a brand new life. Do-do-do, brand new life. Do-do-do, brand new life around the bend. Okay. So when they say, but you're on your way, I swear I listened to that theme song so many times, I swear they don't say on your way. But, whatever. We'll get into that later.
Because you can't skip it.
I know.
You can't skip the theme song.
I watched the theme song. Pretty soon I realized I could fast forward through it, but there was no skip option. So definitely the first 3 seasons I watched it, and I was like, and that's when it changed, I think. Yeah. It was like the beginning of season 3, it's a new singer.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God. So yeah, Who's the Boss? I mean, okay.
Did you watch this when you were growing up?
I watched this growing up.
Do you remember it being as racy as it is?
No. Okay. So let's talk about this. It started in what, 1984?
Started September 20th, 1984 on ABC.
Okay.
If you'd like, we can drop in.
Oh, we could drop in. I do have to mention.
Drop in?
Yes, because in September of 1984,
okay,
I would have still been 6 because I would have turned 7 in November of 1984.
Okay, I was 9. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, I was 9.
So this show, I mean, I'm always like, oh, I loved Who's the Boss. And I could remember the premise of Who's the Boss.
Sure. And Samantha.
And, yeah, of course. And I'm like, okay, when I'm watching this, the episode about camp remembered every detail.
Yeah.
The episode where the little girl tells her she looks like a porcupine because her hair grows in, and she says, that's the way it grows. I'm like, I never saw, there were no reruns when I ever saw, I'm like, how do I remember those specifically? Mm-hmm. But when I started watching this from the beginning, I was like, I don't remember what happened. Like, what does happen?
Yeah.
Why? Who is the boss? I literally was like, I don't remember because I was really young.
Yeah.
And oh my God, I think I texted you at one point and said, is it normal to cry at every episode? For a while, and I'm like, this show is so good.
It is so good.
And I, every day, was like binging a few episodes a day. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I was like hanging out with them.
From episode 1, it's good.
Yes.
Because you don't have to get to know them because they're getting to know each other.
Yes.
Everybody's new to the situation.
Yeah.
So it's not like they have inside jokes with each other. Everybody's new.
Minute 1. Yes. It was, I mean, I was hooked. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have to preface this by saying, we've discussed this on multiple episodes where I remember when we got done with MASH and I was like, oh my God, I miss them so much. It was so, and I miss the characters. Mm-hmm. This might be the one I've had the hardest time with. I'm not going to lie. I had to message Rebecca and say, you need to finish Who's the Boss because I have to talk about them. Because I miss them.
You missed them so
and
much.
I need to talk about them. Because when I was done, I'm not kidding, I came very close to starting it over. I was like, I can't believe I'm done.
It is one of those where I'm like, do I have to stop watching this or can I watch it again? Because
it's so good.
You just want to go back to moments. Like, you just want to go back to episodes and watch them again.
And I loved every there's nothing about it I did write at one point there were a couple seasons in the middle, like 4 and 5. It wasn't that the content was boring. The dynamic between Tony and Angela that we'll get into got boring. Like, it wasn't so much boring. It was just, we're best friends and we're in a non-platonic relationship.
Right.
And it was stale. But the show itself, I just don't even know. I don't have even words to be like,
it's very good
oh my
in
God.
a way that I didn't understand when I was a kid. It was just a thing that existed on TV.
Yes.
So let's drop into the premiere.
Let's do it.
Before we get emotional.
Yes.
More emotional. So the number 1 song on the radio is I Just Called to Say I Love You by Stevie Wonder.
I just called to say I love you.
Okay. You can't get it out of your head, of course, because they play it on Sweet 98 like
Yes.
every half
True
hour.
story.
And Dad's hogging the TV because he wants to watch another premiere on another channel. It's called The Cosby Show.
The Cosby Show, I was going to say.
Right? So grab your Rainbow Bright and I'll get my Cabbage Patch doll and we can watch on the old crappy TV downstairs in the rumpus room.
This is my life in 1984, 100%.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Here we are. First of all, the number of adult jokes, dirty jokes in this show that are done in a way that a child would not understand.
Yes.
They say the funniest things.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God. But it's not a dirty, if you don't
they're
know
really
what they're
good at
talking
it
about,
because you're right. Like you would,
we didn't know.
as kids, we'd be like, oh, huh.
When I was a kid, this was the show with Alyssa Milano on
Yeah.
it. And that's all it was.
And you're like, oh, look, it's a funny sitcom where it's just funny stories. And there's 2 kids I can relate to that are our age and whatever.
This show is not for kids.
No, not at all.
Not at all. In fact, the kids don't nearly play as much of a role in this show as I thought they did when I was a kid.
100%. I thought the same thing. And I was like, and it's so funny because in the very beginning, they're both so young. So, okay, let's just say, so in real life, Jonathan, who's played by Danny, I don't know
Danny Pintauro.
Pintauro is how you say his last name. He is a year older than I am in real life. Alyssa Milano is, I feel like she's about 52 right now, which would be like, I think six years older than I am.
Hold on. She was born in 72. Yeah.
Correct.
So she was barely 11 when the pilot was filmed because the pilot was filmed and then it took 10 months for the show to go to air.
Yeah, you can tell because they are super young in the very beginning, and she's definitely very young. And Jonathan, plays by Danny Pintauro, is so young and such 7. A little cutie. He's like, and very innocent in the very beginning. And it's so funny. Then he goes through a couple awkward years where I felt a little like he was overacting, but he was still so cute and like relatable. Because again, he was like my age at the time, probably when I was little. That's the other big factor, I think, is watching these shows that we grew up with when the children were our age. And now you watch them and the adults are, younger than us.
Younger than us.
I'm like,
not Mona.
But yeah, exactly. You're like, but again, they're our age. We'll just say it that way. Like you're a whole different perspective. Cause again, I remember watching Cheers and never in my life did I think Ted Danson was attractive. And then when I watched Cheers, I was like, how you doing?
Right?
And I'm not going to lie. Tony Danza is probably a 5'7". But a couple times I was like, how you doing?
I know.
I was like, I really like him. I'm like, okay.
Okay, I don't want to admit this on the air, but these two got me a little overheated
Yes,
sometimes.
especially early on.
Right? I was like, could this be an HBO show now, but could they just remake all the episodes with the same script, but just a little bit,
a little bit extra,
a little bit. Oh my God!
Yes, the tension. I mean, okay, so I guess we should stop, just babbling
Just
on and on and on.
Calm down.
Calm it down. So
everybody breathe.
Tony Maselli lives in Brooklyn with his daughter. He is widowed. And with his young daughter.
Which, by the way, both of these actors were born in Brooklyn.
Yes. So, of course, Alyssa Milano plays Samantha Maselli. And Tony Danza plays Tony Maselli. I almost did that backwards. They are going to move away from Brooklyn. He wants Samantha to have a better life. She actually has like a black eye because she got hit on the street or something by some young boys. And she's just, she plays baseball. She does all the things. So she's like, oh, Dad, I love it here. And Mrs. Rosini, who lives in the same
Mrs.
apartment
Rosini.
building, is like, I can't believe you're leaving. And they get in his big, like, old junky van, and they drive to Fairfield, Connecticut. So for those of you who aren't as obsessed maybe as we are and didn't look up the map and calculate exactly the distance between Brooklyn and Fairfield, Connecticut, it's very close. It's like an hour. It's like an hour drive. Well, it says it's an hour.
It always kills me how close things are up in New England.
Yes.
That I never, because we live in Nebraska.
Yeah.
So nothing is close.
Nothing's super close. You're like, okay, the next big town, you're like, oh, they went all that way. No. It's literally like people commute. Because I'm pretty sure we find out later Angela works in Manhattan.
Right.
And they live, so it's not like, it's outskirts when you think about it.
Yeah,
it's like an hour away is technically outskirts. But they show up at this doorstep because Tony applied for the housekeeping position. Well, turns out he shows up at the door and Angela, and it's the famous scene because it's the beginning of the credits that they play every episode. She comes down to bathrobe and her hair in a towel, and she's basically, there must be some mistake.
But Mona's there too.
Yeah, this is for a housekeeper. And I love how right away she tells him he's the wrong sex. And so he's just like, no, I can do it or whatever. Well, Mona hired him, like without Angela's like knowing this. And and then they go back later. There's like a flashback later on that shows like when he met Mona at some building, and she's like, oh yeah, you should come do this. So she's like, well, I guess I'll give it a try. She was very like begrudging, like, okay, I guess this is what we'll do. And so then it was just kind of understood, like him and Sam just kind of moved right in, and like, here we are.
Which is so funny. Like,
yeah,
we'll just move into our house.
Like, I'm your housekeeper. But we come to find out that's the trend in this neighborhood that she lives in. Everyone has a housekeeper. Yes. And everyone is a live-in housekeeper. So,
Which also comes up later with Sam's friends, like in later seasons, where they're like, oh, your housekeeper's, sorry. Because her dad's
she has to take the trash out. And they're like, oh, our housekeeper does that. Oh, sorry, Mr. Maselli. So yeah, it's definitely interesting because they grew up differently. They were, she was raised differently, and then now here they are in this house, and
she's very stiff and very like, yeah, like Mona. Okay, Mona's her mom, and Mona makes fun of her for being so uptight,
rigid,
all
and
the time.
very
By the way, Mona and Tony are the Jack and Karen of this series.
100%.
They are the funniest, and they are always ribbing on
and Angela. Angela and Tony basically become best friends. I mean, there's clearly more going on, but they're best friends. But Tony and Mona are like best friends.
They are best friends.
I mean, and that's from the beginning. It's just their relation, which is more of the we're the same. And then him and Angela, it's like she's different, but they both kind of like change each other in ways, which turns into, of course, just that dynamic relationship. But yeah, Mona, and same thing, going back to this, when this started, Katherine Helmond, who plays Mona, is 55.
And I'm 48.
And I'm just like, as a kid, I'm like thinking,
that's the grandma.
She was the grandma, so she's what, in her 60s? And you find out she's 55. And there's an episode where she comes down in a bikini.
Right?
And I was like, you go, girl. I can't even believe how she looks. But I also am friends with people that are like 55. And I'm like, well, hey.
I was like, wait a minute. Let me see what I'm supposed to look like at 55 in a bikini.
Exactly. I was like, dang. So she's living her life.
She
is
like her husband, Angela's dad died a while ago. But even before that, like Mona has lived a salacious life and had adventures, and she's not slowing down, and she lives elsewhere in the beginning.
Yeah. She's living in her own place, and she just kind of shows up every so often and is there a lot just because must be close enough by that she comes and hangs out, and they end up turning the above the garage into an apartment for her.
Which Angela says used to be a barn.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the house real quick?
Yes.
Hold on. Let me get
I
have notes on this house because you know how we love houses. First of all, The outside of this house, on a scale from 1 to 10 of houses on sitcoms matching the outside and the inside, I would give this a 2.
If that.
It's ridiculous.
And I feel like I remember them showing the outside previously in years and it being way bigger. And now the first time I saw it this time, I was like, wait a minute. That looks like a 1-level ranch from the outside. Almost. A couple times I'm like, wait a second. That's not right.
I mean, it's just like, it's got white siding. It's a flat, like, just like a porch. And like, I mean, it's nothing like the inside. But then you go inside and you've got like this long house. Everything is stone on the inside, and it's like it's a very cozy cottage. And then the backyard is also cottage style, with like flagstone, and then there's like a garage / barn next to it, and there's like doors none of that matches anything.
And why does everybody park outside the front door? Because then there's a garage, but then sometimes people come in the back door. But a lot of times they're like, oh, I was parked on the street. Oh, is that my car? Oh, I'm out there. Oh, and they all come in the front door, and I'm like, wait a minute. Where's the garage and the backyard and the little pull-up area in the back where when like Tony goes to sell the van? And I'm like,
maybe they live on a corner.
It's very
but, like,
interesting.
The front porch also, you've got like this little bench there that we've seen in other sitcoms. It's just, I understand it's a soundstage. It's just you could have done a better job of matching the front to the inside.
Yes, let's give a better picture of the outside of the house.
And the Full house is very inefficient in the way that it's spaced out, but this one is even more so. And because also you go upstairs and there's a whole lobby.
Yeah.
In the upstairs.
My favorite is too, like, so in the beginning you discover this, you walk right in the door and the staircase to the upstairs is right there, like immediately to your left. And then other than that, there's also a mirror right behind the door where everybody hangs their coat. And then an area that goes back, which we discovered later goes also to the basement, like that goes down that way. Well, then you go upstairs, and yes, so there are 4 bedrooms, and upstairs, and like this huge meeting area in the middle. So, like anytime anyone has been out there, and when there's some issues. But clearly, there's the master suite, of course, that Angela has, and then before, so she had a bedroom, and then Jonathan had his bedroom. Well, Tony and Sam move in; they each have their own bedroom. So there's 4 bedrooms up there in this big area. And then you go downstairs, like the main area of the living space. And then there's like a step up to like kind of like a little, what looks like it should be like a sunroom kind of area in the back. And there's a door that goes outside over there.
So many chairs in this house.
Exactly. And then there's the door to the kitchen. And then you go in the kitchen and the kitchen's very moderate and small. And then there's also a door that goes outside. And then years later, we discover that there's a dining room on the front side of the kitchen that we never knew about. So they dine in there a couple times, and at one point you see the door they go into. So it's like as you're looking at the sitcom stage, the kitchen door would be to your right. The dining room door is in front of that. And the dining room is in this weird spot.
But then there's also
a weird study that she has.
The study that
we don't find out till like season 7.
At one point is like just a closet because Angela and Tony are hiding in there. But then also you've got the gigantic fireplace.
Oh, she got a big
that's in the middle of the house.
Yeah, oh yes.
That thing is so huge. You could walk into it. Yeah. Like they've got those giant wingback chairs next to it and it's just so gigantic. Anyway, we know it's not real.
We know, but we love houses. We love talking about them.
And we know they didn't expect us to watch this more than twice.
So true.
But still, come on, you guys.
So many things.
Okay, so that's my rant about the house.
Yes.
And then Mona moves in and makes her apartment, which is awesome. And at one point, Tony moves in there, but we'll get to that.
Yeah. That was also weird.
So anywho, Judith Light, who is gorgeous, left the soap opera One Life to Live to film this series. She used to be on Broadway and stuff before that. Mona was originally intended to be Angela's older sister before they actually cast.
Okay.
But then they were unable to find like an age-appropriate actor that they liked for the part. And they really wanted her to be there. What's her name? Why did I just forget her name? Helmond.
Katherine
Helmond. They really wanted Katherine Helmond. And so they were like, well, let's just make her Angela's mother. I feel like if you had someone her own age there would be a competition for Tony's affections,
Yes.
maybe, which there never was with Mona.
That's
and
very
also
true.
the fact that Mona's her mom and is as saucy as she is, and like Angela's high strung and all that, I think that works way better than making her saucy older sister.
Yeah, this dynamic seemed to work well. I always
perfect.
wonder sometimes, I'm like, Kevin, how did they come up with that? Because like, it just works perfectly. Yeah,
is
the whole
perfect.
situation makes it perfect. Because you're right, a sister would have been different, and there could have been something with Tony.
Yeah, and does she have a family? Would she always be like going out on dates? And it doesn't make any sense.
And that's so true.
This is way better. So Angela has, in one episode, Angela has an ad account for soap or something, like a shower thing. And Moni and Tona.
I like that better.
Moni and Tona.
Moni and Tona.
All right. Mona and Tony go to the commercial shoot, and then the client is all like, oh, we want Tony to be the machismo man and get in the shower. And he has to kiss a lady and he has to take a shower. Does this look familiar to you? This happened in Full House.
I was just going to say, that's true.
Remember later, Uncle Jesse on Full House had an ad agency, and they couldn't find the right guy. And so they were like, we want you. And then he was like, oh, I absolutely can't do it. But then he was like naked in the shower and like, yeah, I want to know if I can live with what I know and own it.
There's lots of TV themes over the years. I think
are.
that get like replicated.
And I think we're probably the only ones maybe who
really
figure these
notice
things
it,
out,
yeah.
but we're kind of hyper fixated.
Yeah, that's true.
But also, this is long before that happened, so it's fine. So Angela is kind of the mother figure for Sam. And it's cute how immediately Sam and Jonathan are like siblings.
Yes.
And they're always like siblings.
Early on, it was a little different because they were both so young and there wasn't quite the dynamic. And then they become super like, I hate you siblings kind of thing.
Yes.
Like that's how you become with your siblings.
And that's awesome. So Angela takes Sam to get her first bra because Tony went to buy one and the lady was like, excuse me. And she buys her a pretty dress while they're out. And then Tony's mad about it because he doesn't want her to be girly.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, she didn't like that. She wants to take it off. And Sam's like, don't make me take it back.
Yeah. Because she's growing up and she's mad. She's mad about the bra, but then it's because it's not like with the little pink bow like Marcy has, Dad. And so he's like, what? And he doesn't understand how, you know, and then he becomes grateful that Angela's there to help him through that process because
She's totally cute.
She has a woman to talk to. By the way, Tony is a former Major League Baseball player. So he got injured and that's why he no longer plays, and so that becomes kind of a theme throughout, but like, you know, he's got his own baseball card and people kind of know him for being famous. And
he also looks like the guy from Taxi. We find out in later seasons.
And at the very end, I love how they played that up there. I look like the guy from Taxi.
This guy comes up to him and he's like, you look like the guy from Taxi. And it's like, oh, no, whatever. And then this beautiful woman comes up. She's like, you look like
don't I look like the guy from Taxi?
Yeah. She's like, are you the guy from Taxi? It's like, yes, I am.
You know, there's like at the very beginning, she got some ad account or something and they go to celebrate and it becomes the end of the credits of the show too. Like they're in the kitchen and she like jumps up and hugs him and then they're both like, oh, sorry. And so there's a lot of, you know, of course, they're two adults who are, you know, clearly attracted to each other and they're slowly becoming like best friends. So there's just so much tension along the way. And early on, it was kind of like a lot of times where they would just be like, I mean, she's going on dates and, you know, and he's always like, oh, beautiful women. And at one point, I mean, you know, early on when Diane Wilmington, the neighbor who's played by Delta Burke, like comes on to him. And so there's just always like little hits and misses where they're dating, but they're both kind of like, oh, okay.
But Angela's never cool with him dating.
Yeah, they're just never like, the funny part is in the beginning it didn't seem, and then all of a sudden it's just like, oh. And then they have weird little things that they say like they're jealous. Like, oh, I have a date. Oh, you do? Oh, with who? And then they're just like, oh, okay, I'll just like pretend I don't really care that much. And in the beginning, you thought it actually seemed as if they were going to fast track it a little more in the beginning. And then they definitely pulled the reins back. Like early on, and I want to say even when they, well, first of all, what was it, like the second episode where he walks in on her in the bathtub? So, like, he sees her naked right away, and there's, like, all this, tension throughout, but I was like, well, dang, he saw her, in the buff, one of the first episodes.
And then wasn't Mona like, well, turn around?
Yeah. I mean, it was just kind of like, yeah, Mona was pushing them together from the very beginning.
Always, everybody always wanted them together. Even before they got together, everybody, like the kids were like, could you guys just please?
Right. And Mona even said to Tony one time when he was discussing something with her, and she's like, nobody wants you two together more than I do, besides the two of you. Like, she's like, so, but, you have to figure this out because it's just got to, it has to, like, be that way without you both like feeling weird about it. And you can see over time that Tony was so worried for sure that it would ruin like their friendship. And it was just interesting in the beginning because sometimes they'd say things to each other. And there was an episode where they both are like drunk or something, and then they're playing around in the kitchen and throwing flour at each other.
Yes.
And they end up kissing. And it was like, oh, okay. So
they ended up in bed together because he was trying to get her into bed.
But it wasn't that episode where they ended up in bed together.
No, it was.
No, it wasn't. So
because she the next morning thought that they had slept together.
Only because she remembered kissing him. The episode they ended up in bed together was when they all watched. They were all sleeping somehow together. Jonathan was sleeping with Tony, and maybe Mona spent the night.
Yes.
And then he switched beds. Then Sam was scared, and then they all climbed into weird beds together.
And then Betty White showed up.
Yes. And then, that's right, because she was doing like her documentary. She was doing an
expose on women bosses or something.
So those two ended up in the bed together then. But after the kiss, it was like he put her to bed, but all she could remember.
Okay, you're right.
Was she goes, oh my God. And she tells Mona that they slept together. And she thinks that it happened. And so then like the next day they're discussing it. And at the end of that episode, like they're talking about it. And he's like, yeah, that didn't happen. And then she realizes it didn't happen. And he was like, I mean, it was all weird. And then he was like, oh, believe me. He goes, if that would have happened, you'd remember it. And she's like, you would too. And it was all, wow.
I mean,
and it's just like that kind of thing happened all the time. Where it was like, well,
how many times did they actually spend the night together? Like on the train?
Right.
When they went to get Jonathan from camp. Oh, I love that episode.
Yes. Oh, the whole camp episode.
First of all,
I remember that one.
They had to be in their birthday suits in that because their clothes were wet. And then she like walks out with like the sheets on. And then like they're like, we're going to have a curtain between these two beds so we can't see each other. We're not like sleeping in the same room.
I love how the guy brings the pajamas in and he hands Tony the pajamas and hands her the socks.
Yes.
And I'm like, they put the blanket up in the middle and they're both like kind of looking over each other like, ah. But they end up sleeping in the same bed because hers, like the ceiling crashed down. And like even that one, first of all, they find out that they kissed each other at camp back in the day.
Of course.
So, and again, that was one of those things I always remembered. So they were at make out point or kissing rock or whatever both of them called it. Rock. It was both, I think, because he called it something more and she was like, no, it was kissing rock. And he was like, oh, it was make out point. And she lied and said her name was Ingrid. And they ended up kissing. And they find this out, of course, years later. So then they spend the night in this cabin after they got caught in the rain. And, like, the next day, they're, like, at the cabin. And now Jonathan's loving it. He hated it before, but now all these guys
they were there
like
to take him home.
And he ends up, like, they're standing outside and they're talking about it. And they're like, okay, well, obviously the last one happened. Everything was fine. And even then he was like, you know what else I found out? You have really warm toes. Oh. And then that's how I was like, okay.
Seriously. And at the end of it, they were both like, yeah, something could have happened. Yeah, could have happened.
Yeah. I'm like, why? Why not? Oh my God. I now I need to go back and watch like the first 3 seasons because it was like so, although it was frustrating. So I'm like, but it was you guys so just get together. But you're right. It was like, good. It worked.
Like when they were, another time they slept in the same bed was on the train.
Yeah.
And
that was like way later on. Yeah.
That was way later on. But I think that was like season 7 or something. But he was like, she was like, I mean, if you want to, like, you know, it could be more than this. And he's like, but of course something else happens. And
it's so interesting because early on, they were still dating people and they were kind of doing their own thing, but they'd get jealous when people were dating.
Well, at the end of season 2, Tony told Angela that he loved her because he was under anesthesia and he was about to have his appendix out.
Yeah.
And she was like, what did he say? What did he say? What did he say? And the nurse is like, I think he said he loved you. Yeah.
And then, of course, she came back to the hospital and they were kind of talking about it. They danced around it. And then one would walk out and then one would look at the other and then they look back. And I'm like, well, and then she almost got married to what's-his-buck, Jeffrey. He shows up and then, like, that's just that he was, like, part of that. They went to a wedding together. And then they were, like, kind of imagining, like, what it would be like.
Whose wedding was it?
I don't remember.
Marilee Stone
yes!
from Dallas.
Yes, Marilee Stone from
wedding.
Dallas shows up.
Played by, what is her name? Fern Ferguson? Or, hold on, I got
probably
notes.
just have Marilee Stone written down.
Her name is Fern Fitzgerald.
Okay.
Sorry. So she's in 2 episodes. She's one of
she's Angela's friend.
Yeah.
And they get married and then, like, they're at
and
this
they're
wedding,
imagining each other as the
saying the
bridegroom.
vows and doing that. And then they're, like, hanging out. And they're basically, like, anytime anything's going around, they're like, oh, I'm going to go to this theater production. Oh, well, of course Tony's going to go with me. Oh, of course Angela's going to go with me. They're like each other's forever kind of date when they don't have something. Well, they're at this and then they kind of talk about it and then they're weird. And then this Jeffrey guy is like, oh, is she with you?
Yes.
And he's like, well, no. And he ends up asking Angela out. And then they start dating, like full on big relationship dating. And Jeffrey's always around. Everybody else kind of makes fun of him. And he wants to be Jeffrey, and Tony always calls him Jeff.
Jeffrey with a G.
Yeah. They're getting serious, and he wants to marry her. And then she's, like, sick one day, and basically Tony, like, climbs a ladder outside her window and is, like, writes the word no on the window. And she basically tells him no. And then she's like, and everybody's always kind of like, is it Tony? Is it Angela? Like, they're, anytime somebody, they say no, and they're kind of like, oh, well, no, da, da, da. After that breakup, it was almost like they had an understanding that they weren't dating people. And it was weird because there was so much, like, hit and miss kind of things.
But there had to be. There had to be. Because honestly, once they got together, it wasn't as interesting.
Exactly, that's true. And I was going to say, too, that episode where, and I think it was the episode where he ended up having surgery. Before that, they had, like, a dinner together, like a little romantic kind of intimate dinner at the house. And she cooked.
It was wasn't it for, like, his anniversary?
It was their anniversary, him, like, moving
Yeah.
in. And then they were talking, and they're like, something about their relationship. And they were like, maybe we
That's
should
right.
go over to the couch and talk about this. And they're like,
Yes.
And he's like, maybe we should. And I was like, oh, this
gonna
is
do
it.
They're going to do it.
And then he doubles over in pain and has to go to the hospital and get his appendix out. And then, of course, says he loves her. And you're like, I want to punch myself in the face. Like, oh my gosh, get together, you two.
Why? Well,
So there's like all of those kinds of weird things.
speaking of seasons that didn't really work out, season 7, we have Billy,
Oh,
played by Jonathan. I don't know how you say his name. Halial Carr.
I don't know.
He was the cousin Oliver.
Yep.
Who's the boss?
As soon as Cousin Oliver happened, I was like, oh, here we go with Cousin Oliver.
There's a child now because Danny Pintauro was getting older and his voice was changing. So this show, who I don't know what made them think that was that important in a show where we have dirty jokes every other minute.
Right.
Like,
Not
they're
necessary.
like, oh, we need a child that's smaller. So he was like Mrs. What's her name? Miss Rosini's
Mrs.
friend's
Rosini's somebody's
grandchild.
Kid. Or grandchild, because you're right. She was taking care of him.
His grandma was like dying, so they were in the hospital, and they're like, sure, we'll take care of your kid. So he was going to live with them, but then she got all better. And literally in season 8, they were like, oh, this kid used to live with us, but his grandma got better, so he's gone now.
He basically took over. Like, Tony was like, oh, I'm basically his guardian now. And Angela's like, yeah, I'll help you. And at one point, I'm pretty sure Angela was also dating somebody at that time. And she's like, well, I'm also responsible. He's like, isn't he Tony's responsibility?
Right.
And she's like, well, it's kind of both of us.
Complicated.
And everyone's like, all right, well, when you figure that out, you let me know. And so that whole thing was so strange because, of course, then they had all these things. They'd go to school. They were buying him toys.
Yeah.
And
But nobody liked him.
No, and he was
no
like,
one in the house liked him.
Mona called him Ed, which I thought was hilarious.
Mona couldn't stand him. She was like, oh, take that kid with you.
Which was like, so then he was around, and then the next thing we know, like the next season, they're like, oh, Billy. Well, yeah, because they went to the psychic, and she's like, well, we kind of, when we had Billy around, but, then he went off to his other family. What? They just got rid of him. And they were like,
did.
I guess we'll explain it away this way.
He wasn't a good character.
No.
He was annoying.
No.
It was just like silly hijinks that were never necessary because those things didn't happen with the kids.
No.
Earlier in the series. So why do they need to happen with Billy?
I know. And he was that was very interesting. And I was thinking about how that happened. Because early on too, there was also another episode where Angela admitted in therapy that she loved Tony. And that was actually before or right around the same time when he had that surgery. And so many things happened. Tony turned down a job because he would have had to move. And it was like he sticks around or whatever and just does whatever. But I thought about that too, because I think right when that happened, and I want to say that was like going to be in Washington, and she was like, well, why? And he's like, oh, well, I'm happy and, whatever else. And I do have to mention too that halfway through season 4, okay, if anybody watches the show till the end, right before the ending scene and credits, they show the outside of the house, which we've already discussed. And then Tony Danza says, who's the boss will be back in a moment. Stick around. So the first 3.5 seasons, it's who's the boss will be back in a moment. Stick around. All threatening.
Yeah. Love it.
And then halfway through season 4, it's who's the boss will be back in a moment.
We're
Stick
excited.
around.
We're excited. We're excited.
I was like, why did we go from him threatening us to stick around?
Stick around
to
or
it
else.
Being all nice and
Did
happy.
you say it with him every time he said it?
100%.
I did.
100%.
Okay.
I was like, oh man, are we going to have to stop talking about who's the boss for right now?
I just did the thing where I flash you the time. I'm like,
oh
my God, we got time. Okay. I have a lot more to talk about.
I have a ton to talk about.
I think we got to calm down. We got to cool our jets.
We do.
We got to turn down our burners.
We'll go to season 4 and 5 where Tony and Angela were just friends and didn't do anything else.
Simmer down. Okay. And we're going to come back next week. However, let us know on our Facebook page. We have a Facebook page. We have a private Facebook group that you can become a part of. And you can let us know what you're thinking about Who's the Boss. And email us at tvtangents@gmail.com. You can also find us on patreon.com/tvtangents, where you can get all kinds of extra goodies.
Yes.
And there's more than just episodes. There's bingo cards. There's history of TV. There's all the good stuff. So find us there. And I'm so excited to come back next week.
Know.
I can't even breathe right now. I can't breathe.
So many things to say.
Hey, let's wrap it up though.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, clink.
Clink.
I'll get more wine.
Yes. Life is long, but you're on your way. Okay. I cannot hear that. It's life so long, but what do I think it is? Now I got to listen to it. It's definitely not you're on your way.
Oh, okay.
No matter how many times I hear it, he doesn't say that.
I'm going to introduce this show. Do you mind?
I don't mind at all.
All right. Stop glugging.
Let me glug first.
Just put it on there because we don't. For some reason, our blotter is gone.
I don't know.
I don't know what's been happening in this studio since I've been gone.